Welcome back to CIA Declassified. A thick gray fog hangs over the Potomac, mirroring the moral ambiguity that has settled into the bones of the intelligence community. The air in the capital is heavy with the scent of ozone from early computers and the sharp tang of clinical floor wax, a combination that defines the sanitized brutality of the post-war era. It is 1952, and the world is no longer fighting on open battlefields, but in the claustrophobic corridors of the human psyche. The Iron Curtain has fallen, and behind it, the Soviet Union is perfecting the art of the show trial and the staged confession, leading American leadership to fear that the very nature of truth is being weaponized against them. The response was a descent into the neurological-frontier, a journey into the dark spaces where biology meets betrayal. Imagine a room in a safe house in West Germany where the only light comes from a single buzzing fluorescent bulb that flickers with the rhythm of a failing heart. The windows are blacked out here with heavy lead-lined curtains, and the air is a stagnant soup of clinical alcohol, stale tobacco, and the metallic tang of fear. On a stainless steel table sits a tray of amber vials, the liquid keys to a man's identity, gleaming with a promise that is as seductive as it is terrifying. This was the birth of MKTRUTH. It wasn't just a search for information, it was a total war against the internal monologue, an attempt to strip away the privacy of the soul. Visualize the high-stakes target strapped to a gurney, their eyes wide and unfocused as they realize they are no longer in control of their own silence. They aren't being beaten. They are being chemically invited to surrender their agency to the drip of a syringe. As the needle enters the vein, the barbiturate-blends begin to circulate, dissolving the barriers between thought and speech until the individual becomes a bystander to their own confession. This was the ethical void where the agency played God with the synaptic gap, hoping to find the chemical formula that would render the concept of a secret obsolete. How did MKTRUTH get its name? The MK prefix was the standard designation for the technical services staff of the CIA, standing for manufacturing and nodding, a cryptic way of describing the creation of tools for clandestine work. The truth suffix was uncharacteristically literal. It reflected the absolute, almost religious obsession of the era's intelligence directors with finding a substance that would make lying biologically impossible. It was the holy grail of counterintelligence. We are pulling back the chemical curtain on the substances that defined this dark era. MKTRUTH utilized sodium pentothal, a fast-acting anesthetic. Records show the agency experimented with amobarbitol to induce a twilight sleep. The agency tested the substances on high-value defectors to verify their stories. Documentation reveals the use of caffeine stimulants to wake targets between doses to prevent total unconsciousness. Records confirm that MKTRUTH was a precursor to the broader MKUltra program. The project involved Office of Scientific Intelligence doctors. Documentation shows the agency sought ego-depressing drugs to lower psychological resistance. Records verify that experiments were conducted at the Camp Dietrich facility. The program investigated the use of mescaline as a potential truth drug. Records show the agency monitored Soviet brainwashing techniques to mirror their effects. The interrogation manuals from this era detailed dosage schedules for interrogation. The agency explored scopolamine, also known as devil's breath, for its amnesiac properties. Records indicate the use of chloral hydrate to induce rapid sedation. Documentation reveals that MKTRUTH was specifically tasked with finding a defensive countermeasure against enemy interrogation. The project explored the synergy between hypnosis and drug administration. Records show the agency's Project Bluebird fed directly into MKTRUTH research. Documentation confirms that Seconal was tested for its ability to produce extreme talkativeness. The agency maintained a drug repository for exotic chemicals sourced globally. Records show that MKTRUTH researchers studied the physiology of lying to identify biomarkers. Documentation reveals that interrogation sessions were often recorded on magnetic wire for later acoustic analysis. The project investigated sensory deprivation as a multiplier for drug effects. Records show the United States Navy cooperated on chemical speech research. Documentation reveals the agency tested alcohol potentiation to see if it lowered the threshold for truth-telling. The project sought a reagent that could be administered covertly in food or drink. Records verify that the agency analyzed the success rates of the NKVD's use of L drugs. Documentation shows the use of amphetamines to trigger logorrhea. It's uncontrollable talking. Logorrhea. The agency explored benzodiazepines in their early experimental form. Records show the researchers attempted to map the speech centers of the brain using chemical stimulation. Documentation reveals that many MKTRUTH subjects were unaware they were part of a CIA study. The project utilized polygraph tests to measure the validity of drugged statements. Records show the agency attempted to find a chemical reset to erase the memory of the interrogation. Documentation confirms that the Technical Services Division developed specialized concealment devices for the drugs. The project examined curare derivatives for muscle relaxation during sessions. It's curare. It is curare. Records show that MKTRUTH protocols were used on suspected double agents within the agency. Documentation reveals the agency's interest in cannabis extracts for inducing a state of suggestibility. The project studied the recovery time needed for a subject to appear normal after a session. Records verify the agency used synthetic peptides in an attempt to manipulate mood. Documentation shows that MKTRUTH was part of a broader behavioral control initiative. The agency analyzed the linguistic patterns of drugged subjects. Records show that ether was briefly considered but rejected due to its volatility. Documentation confirms that MKTRUTH results were shared with the Joint Intelligence Objectives Agency. The project tested the duration of action for over 50 different chemical compounds. Records show the agency monitored the pupillary response as an indicator of drug depth. Documentation reveals that medical ethics boards were bypassed entirely for these operations. The project influenced the interrogation protocols used during the Korean War. Records verify that MKTRUTH was officially absorbed into MKUltra in 1953. Documentation shows the agency's fear that a speech inhibitor might be developed by the Soviets first. The project established the first biochemical intelligence database. Records show that the truth serum quest led to the discovery of several new anticonvulsants. Documentation reveals that the agency used prison volunteer programs to test non-lethal dosages. The project mapped the reaction times of subjects under the influence of barbiturates. Records show that MKTRUTH was one of the most highly classified, compartmentalized programs of the era. Documentation confirms that the success criteria were often based on the volume of information rather than its accuracy. The project proved that chemical coercion often leads to false confessions. Records show that the agency utilized psychiatrists to refine the emotional manipulation techniques. Documentation reveals that the legal framework for MKTRUTH was non-existent, operating under executive deniability. The test created chemical signatures that could be detected in the body for weeks. A quote from a declassified CIA internal memo dated 1952. The search for a substance which will reliably and predictably produce a state of information confession is of the highest priority for the security of the state. Quote from a declassified OSI report dated 1951. It is essential that we develop techniques for the extraction of information from targets who have been trained to resist standard interrogation. Quote from a declassified CIA interrogation manual. The use of drugs in interrogation is not a replacement for skill, but a catalyst for the breakdown of the individual's will to resist. A quote that is attributed to an MKTRUTH lead scientist in declassified testimony, but it doesn't say his name or her name. We are operating in a field where the rules of medicine do not apply. Our patient is the enemy and the cure is the truth. A quote that is from a declassified Project Bluebird technical analysis. The twilight state induced by these barbiturates allows the interrogator to bypass the conscious filters of the subject's mind. A quote from a declassified CIA Inspector General report dated 1963, certain chemical agents have shown a remarkable ability to produce a state of narco-hypnosis in which the subject is unable to maintain a deceptive cover. And a quote from a declassified policy briefing dated 1952, the ethical considerations are secondary to the survival of the democratic process against a totalitarian threat that acknowledges no such limits, end quote. The paper trail for MKTRUTH is a landscape of scars and silence. The core folder on subject acquisition and long-term disposal is estimated to have over 400 pages entirely removed or blacked out. These redactions are consistently justified under FOIA Exemption B1, which protects information that is specifically authorized under criteria established by an executive order to be kept secret in the interest of national defense, and Exemption B3, which refers to information specifically exempted from disclosure by statute, in this case, the National Security Act. What is hidden behind those B1 and B3 shields? I suspect the missing pages detail the unwitting human testing registry, a list of American citizens, perhaps hospital patients or soldiers, who were dosed without consent. I also believe the redactions hide the neurological damage audit, which likely tracks the survivors who suffered permanent brain damage or personality dissolution. The heaviest redactions probably cover the liaison exchange protocols detailing which allied nations participated in these human experiments, a revelation that would still cause a geopolitical earthquake today. When the government hides the truth, the imagination fills the gaps. For instance, there is a theory called the genetic memory. Some speculate that the agency wasn't just looking for current secrets, but trying to use drugs to unlock ancestral memories buried in the DNA of their subjects. This theory suggests that the liquid key was intended to peer into the deep history of rival bloodlines. Then there's the Manchurian candidate speculation. It's a persistent theory that MKTRUTH was actually a screen for reverse interrogation, teaching agents how to give false truth serums information while under the influence. This would essentially turn an agent into a biological decoy capable of feeding the enemy perfectly crafted lies under the needle. Then there's the collective consciousness theory. It's more extreme. It suggests the agency believed that enough of these drugs could connect a subject to a universal mind, think Jungian theory, allowing them to view secrets happening thousands of miles away. Adherents believe the goal was to create chemical psychics who could transcend physical space. And then there's the synthetic soul theory, which we've addressed a few times before, but it comes into play here too. Some believe the agency successfully found a way to delete a human personality entirely. Spoiler alert, they have actually found that, but the tests that they performed led to many people, including CIA employees who volunteered to participate, being institutionalized for the rest of their lives and having a psychotic break that they couldn't come back from, which is in quite a few episodes that I've already recorded. Anyway, the blank state would only be loyal to the CIA. This conspiracy posits that high-level officials are actually MK shells running on pre-programmed scripts. As far as whether or not Project MKTRUTH was a success, tactically it was a scientific quagmire. While the agency successfully identified dozens of compounds that could induce talkativeness, they failed to find a true truth serum. The failure lie in the reliability gap. Drugs like sodium pentothal proved to be unreliable narrators, often making subjects so suggestible that they hallucinated confessions or told the interrogator exactly what they wanted to hear to end the session. It was a tactical success in establishing the baseline of vulnerability, teaching the agency that the mind could be chemically unhinged even if the data extracted was suspect. Strategically, it was a moral catastrophe with an intelligence pivot. The program was a failure because it never produced a weaponized truth drug that could be deployed reliably in the field. However, it led to a strategic shift from chemical extraction to psychological manipulation. As the agency realized that ego breaking through isolation and sensory deprivation was more effective than any needle, this pivot fundamentally changed the doctrine of interrogation for the next 50 years, moving the focus from the vein to the environment. As far as operational and technological breakthroughs are concerned, MKTRUTH facilitated quite a few, such as modern anesthesiology. protocols. The rigorous study of barbiturate thresholds and how chemicals affect the reticular activating system paved the way for modern balanced anesthesia in society today. The military utilizes this data to develop field anesthesia kits for combat medics, allowing for life-saving surgeries in high-stress environments where traditional hospital settings are unavailable. In the intelligence community, these protocols inform the medical counter-surveillance, ensuring that officers are aware of how their own physiology might react to sedatives or incapacitating agents. Neurological imaging foundations. By documenting the disorientation protocols and how the brain fails under chemical stress, the agency inadvertently mapped the functional anatomy of speech and memory, knowledge that is used today to develop treatments for memory loss disorders like Alzheimer's. The intelligence community applies this mapping to cognitive vulnerability assessments, identifying the specific brain regions where people are most susceptible to fatigue and influence. The military uses these foundations to refine pilot selection processes, using neuroimaging to identify candidates with high stress resilience in the core speech and logic centers. Forensic toxicology refinement. The agency's need to detect subtle chemical traces and defectors led to breakthroughs in mass spectrometry, which are the standard today for crime lab testing and anti-doping agencies worldwide. For the military, this refinement is critical in chemical, biological, radiological detection, CBRN, allowing for the rapid identification of trace nerve agents on the battlefield. The intelligence community uses these advanced toxicological tools for technical attribution, tracing the unique chemical signatures of poisons used in assassinations back to specific laboratories or nation states. And error-correcting neurology. The discovery of logic upsets, where a mind forgets a piece of data without being physically destroyed, led to the study of cognitive redundancy used in high-stress training for pilots and emergency responders. The intelligence community integrates these breakthroughs into information security training, teaching operatives how to compartmentalize information so that a logic upset in one area doesn't compromise the entire operation. Military applications include the development of neuromorphic computing systems that mimic the brain's ability to self-correct during data corruption or electronic interference. The legacy of MKTRUTH is the end of mental innocence. We learned that the vault of the mind has a chemical combination and that the state was willing to turn its own citizens into laboratory animals to find it. The program proved that while you can break a man's silence, you cannot always trust the truth that pours out of the cracks. As the years passed, the liquid key evolved into the more sophisticated psychological hammer of the late 20th century. We must look at these early experiments not as failure, but as the moment the agency stopped viewing the human mind as a person and started viewing it as a target environment. The ethical void created in 1952 has never truly been filled. It has only been renamed and relocated. We live in an era where neuro-influence is the new frontier, moving from the needle to the algorithm. The data points from Camp Dietrich are the ancestors of modern social engineering and biometric profiling. Every time you interact with a system designed to nudge your behavior, you are feeling the long, cold reach of the liquid key in its digital form. Trust the internal monologue, but verify the chemical influence. Remember that a mind is a sanctuary only as long as the blood-brain barriers are intact. In a psychological conflict, the winner is the one who controls the needle. And remember, the truth isn't a light, it's a liquid. Join us next time as we examine Operation Stopwatch, a joint CIA-MI6 operation to tunnel beneath the sectors of Berlin. We'll look at the copper taps, the subterranean spies, and the moment the world's most sophisticated eavesdropping project was compromised from within. Join us next time for the Berlin Boar. In the meantime, I'll see you in the archives.